You have something to say, but you stop. You imagine the reaction, and slowly that anticipation becomes louder than your own voice. So you say nothing, and the moment passes. A young monk named Arian lived in a monastery carved into a river valley. He wasn't the loudest in the group, nor the most confident, but his quietness masked a relentless curiosity. Inside his mind, he was constantly deconstructing the teachings. He saw connections others missed, and developed insights that occasionally left even the senior monk speechless. But Arian rarely shared these thoughts. Before speaking, he would scan the room, measuring every face. To him, the other monks often felt like looming silhouettes, their eyes tracking his every move, ready to judge a single wrong word. During group lessons, he developed a defense. He would hold an idea tightly and wait, hoping someone else would say it first. If a peer spoke up and was well received, Arian felt a sense of safety. As no one mentioned it, he let the idea disappear, convinced that his silence was the only way to remain secure. This habit meant that his most unique contributions were gone before they were ever voiced. He had become a master of erasing himself to avoid a conflict that hadn't even begun. This hesitation was rooted in a single afternoon 2 years prior. Arian had been painting a small image of a bird on cloth when an older monk stopped to look. The monk stood there for a moment, said nothing, and simply walked away. In the vacuum of that silence, Arian didn't see a busy monk or a tired one. He saw a complete dismissal of his worth. He hadn't touched a paintbrush since that day. The memory of that one silent walk away was enough to halt his creativity for 2 years. Even now, in a fresh morning lesson, the sight of that same monk near the window was enough to freeze him. When asked for his thoughts, Arian claimed he had nothing to share, while his real insight sat heavy and unspoken in his chest. We often carry these small, ambiguous moments forward, letting a single perceived slight from the past dictate how much space we are allowed to occupy in the present. That evening, Arian sought out the old master. He sat in the master's small room and admitted he was stuck, that he had stopped speaking, he stopped painting, and felt unable to move forward. He asked the master how the mere possibility of what others might think could have so much power over his actual life. The master invited him to the garden the following morning. On a wooden table sat a simple bamboo cage. Inside was a small brown bird, and the door was wide open. The bird didn't fly. It sat on its wooden bar, looking at the garden, then looking back at the interior of the cage. It stayed perfectly still. The master asked Arian to find the lock. Arian looked at the bamboo frame and the open door. There were no latches, no keys, and no wires. Nothing physical was keeping the bird inside the box. Freedom is a physical reality, but it means very little if you are still convinced that the exit is barred. For this bird, the cage door used to be closed. It spent months learning that the solid boundary was absolute. Even when that barrier dissolves, the learned behavior remains. The bird stays inside the lines of a cage that is no longer there. Arian watched the bird and asked how one escapes a prison that is built entirely out of these internal memories and assumptions. The master didn't offer a philosophical answer. He simply reached out and placed a small grain of food just an inch past the open door. The bird leaned forward. It hesitated, its feet shifting on the wood, before it finally steps forward into the open air to take the grain. A moment later, it flew into the trees. Leaving a mental cage doesn't require a grand transformation. It only requires one small action that is slightly stronger than the old fear of the boundary. The master reminded Arian that people will always look, they will always whisper, or simply walk away. Those are neutral actions that others take. They aren't physical walls that stop you from moving. The sense of being trapped is often just a memory of a door that was once closed, being projected onto a door that is open now. Arian returned to his room that night. He sat for a long time before finally pulling the small, dusty cloth out of the dark corner where it had sat for 2 years. He dipped his brush in ink and touched it to the fabric. The ink stroke was simple, a river stone. But the act of creating it meant that the older monk's silence no longer decided what Arian could do with his hands. If you are waiting for someone to give you permission to leave your cage, realize that the door has been open this whole time. All that's left is to take the first step.